So getting started with gear, and I know we're kind of running short on time here, but getting started on gear, I think generally the trend is most people start inexpensively, and as their interest grows and they realize that this is something that they're going to need more expensive gear to do it really well, they grow it as much as their budget and interest allows. Two things to keep in mind is that cameras tend to become outdated before lenses do. So typically if you have a balance between, let's say you have, just rough numbers, $2,000, rather than buy an $1,800 body and a $200 lens, you might want to buy a less expensive body and a more expensive lens, because that glass is going to last you a lot longer than the body is going to. And as new things happen and the cameras are becoming better and more capable, you're going to find that if you have to keep on replacing the body and your lens selection is still pretty meager as the process goes along, you're not going to gain a whole lot with the new bodies. But if you have better glass and hold back on the bodies a little bit, you're going to find that those new bodies that are more capable are going to be even more capable because you have better lenses. And the second thing is typically choose a brand and stick with it. When I was shooting 35mm, I was a Pentax shooter. And back when the digital SLRs first really became available, it was Nikon or Canon. It was really pretty much it. So I got a Nikon D70, which was the first digital SLR that really came out that wasn't a professional in camera, and it was definitely expensive at the time. But that basically started me off as a Nikon shooter. And if I was to basically take all the lenses that I personally own and switch over to being a Canon shooter, it's going to cost quite a bit of money to replace all those lenses. And even though you can sell them on the used market and get some money for them, you're not going to necessarily get your money's worth out of them. It doesn't really come out that way. So again, good glass is expensive. Getting a lens that has the bigger aperture, faster lenses and things. How do you really know what you need? If you need to have, let's say, a 50mm f1.2 Canon lens that's going to run you a little over $1,000. Well, what if you could get away with buying an f1.8 50mm Canon lens, which is about $100? Big difference. And for the most of the people, the f1.8 lens is probably going to do the same for them. And honestly, shooting at f1.2 is really difficult, and you're not going to get as good a result sometimes because you're going to be like, it's a great shot, but my focus is off because my focus depth is 1/10 of a millimeter and I can't actually see what's in focus here, So one of the things I found is a good option is sometimes to rent the equipment, or you can borrow your friends and things to try some things out. But sometimes if you're buying a high-end lens or something that your friends don't necessarily have, rent it. You can basically rent stuff a lot of times for a lot cheaper than making the mistake of buying something and then realizing that it wasn't really what you wanted. Some examples would be renting the body to try the differences between the full frame sensors versus the crop factor sensors and things like that. I've rented tilt shift lenses. I've rented high-end bodies for specific shoots and things like that. If you're going to buy a 600mm f4 lens and spend $10,000 for it, you better know that it's going to be worth your money. Same thing, you can rent things like gimbal heads and things that you would want to have when you're pulling around these big lenses, because they're really heavy and they're hard to hold and manage. You can rent that lens for $462 a week, which is not cheap, but if you're going on a trip and you're spending money to go someplace where you're going to be, or even if you're coming here, it's the ideal season for certain migratory patterns, whatever it might be, and you want to be able to shoot wildlife, or something is happening where you want to be able to take advantage of having that longer reach, renting it for $462 for the week might be something to do, especially if you want to try it before you buy it. You could rent it for 20 days short of a year at the rental price before you'd pay for it. So, I mean, obviously, yes, you don't want to rent it and then not have anything when you get done. But if you're going to spend $10,000 on a lens, maybe trying it for a few $100s isn't such a bad idea first. And just a quick note, if you are shooting avian photography, this thing called the Better Beamer, it's from a company called Visual Echoes. This is something that instead of shaping the light by basically constricting it by flagging it off or blocking where it goes, this is basically like a lens for your flash, and it refocuses the light to like a longer, skinnier beam, so you can hit those faraway birds and be able to put in a little bit more fill light, even if they're a little further off than what your typical focal length of your, I guess if you think of a focal length. Interesting thing, the on-camera flashes like this, the way they differ from studio lights, typically a studio light, it's all about reining in the light. If the bare flash will just go all over the whole room. You put on reflectors and then boxes and things to basically kind of close in the light to where you want it. Where with speed lights, they're a little bit more intelligent in the sense of they have a lens inside, and they will, as the lens zooms in and out, the pattern of light changes to match what your lens is. That's the camera is talking to the flash. So if you're shooting at 24 millimeters, it's flashing all the way wide. And if you're shooting at 200 millimeters, if your flash can go that far, it beams it into this narrower beam of light, which means it uses less battery, it can recycle more quickly, and it doesn't, like, you know, maybe alert all the other animals in the area that there's this huge flash of light that maybe they should fly away now. You know, you can kind of pinpoint the light a little bit more that way.
How much would something like that cost?
That's $40. Yeah, it's basically just like a low, it's not a really high quality glass lens. It's a plastic lens with a kind of like this, you know, Velcro on, or somehow I've actually seen how it attaches, but it just kind of, you know, friction fit on the front of the lens.
Are they model specific, or?
They're model specific only because of the size of where they attach. It's usually like they'll fit a couple models of flashes, and they're all about the same price.
Does Nikon make that too? Or is it?
I don't know that Nikon makes that kind of a thing. I've only seen a couple of companies, in this case Visual Echoes is this one, that make that. Nikon doesn't typically, as far as I've seen, make many accessories for in front of the flash, really. So again, getting out and shooting is one of the best ways to become a better photographer. You can't think about what you're going to do and then know that I'm going to go out on this one day with all my gear and do all the right things and then just happen to do everything right. You're going to make mistakes, and part of that shooting digitally is the great thing about it is that you can look at your mistakes. You can look at, this is all blurry. Well, let's take a look at the settings, and you can see, you know, what your shutter speed, your aperture, all this information is saved in the digital file, and you can use that to give yourself feedback. And there's a lot of people out there where you can post images on these forums and things on the web, and people will give you their critique as well as, you know, help you to figure out what you can do to produce better images. I know some people who do this thing they call Project 365, which is basically, you know, you basically shoot one photo a day at the least, and you post it up online somewhere. People do it on Facebook or wherever, Flickr, and the idea is that you're forced to shoot something every day. There's plenty of days where I don't shoot anything, and if I was forced to grab the camera and shoot something, it would always be kind of in the back of my mind. It would help remind me to think photographically, so it kind of keeps it more, you know, you'll be more fluent in thinking photography, if that's a word or not. Photography trips, I'm a big you know, supporter of taking these photography trips, whether it be just like a road trip for like a day or just around your neighborhood or whatever it might be. If you don't live right in the area, come here and shoot here for the day. But I've also done some things where, again, you've seen some of the photos where we'll fly out to like Vegas as like a central area. Flights are cheap there, hotels are cheap there if you're going to stay in a hotel. Otherwise, you know, rent a car and do camping and stuff. And there's tons of little natural parks or national parks that you can hit within a day or so of that area. And so that's one of the things that I'd like to do. And the last thing from this is just, you know, the best camera is the one that you have with you. Again, going back to what I said in the beginning, you could have the greatest camera and all the knowledge and have the ability, and if you happen to miss an opportunity because you don't have a camera with you, your camera was worthless to you at that time. So having a good cell phone or a point and shoot in your pocket, or, you know, having, you know, the foresight to bring your camera with you more places is going to end up paying off in the long run to becoming a better photographer and having a more diverse portfolio. So again, this is just going back to the whole, you know, shooting your friends and the people who are with you. My friend shot me. This is again in Death Valley. This is the Mesquite Dunes out there, and he shot this photo of me, and while I was busy shooting this. And then I didn't realize he was shooting me, and then later when he was looking on the back of his camera, I took a little candid shot of him as well. So this is a photo he took of me at that Horseshoe Bend that caused a little bit of trouble with my wife when she saw this later, and she was concerned about the placement on that rock there. And so I heard a little bit about that. But it's deceiving. It's not as bad as it looks, but you can't convince her of that. Well, but then I wouldn't be able to get the shot. So, you know, the pains we go to for our art. But in any case, just a couple quick funny story to end with here. Leaving Death Valley, there's a little abandoned ghost town called Rhyolite, just a little bit northwest, and it's not that far from civilization, maybe like 6 or so miles from the nearest town, but you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere when you're out there. There's nothing really around there. We actually we shot until sunset in Death Valley, so we didn't get there until after dark. We didn't really have anything to see in the distance for bearings. It just felt like we were in the middle of nowhere with this kind of spooky ghost town. Clear sky. We were out there playing around with off-camera flashes where we'd, again, set the camera up on the tripod, make an exposure for a certain number of seconds, and then during that, 5-second or 10-second exposure, pop a couple flashes to kind of shape the area a little bit. And so this is a bank actually out there. And this was, I believe, might have been a post office for a while, but it's basically an old train car. And cameras on a tripod. And what I did a number of shots like this, and this is the one that I feel like gave me the best exposure. But for some of them, I'm looking at this, and so again, it's a little spooky. It's a ghost town, so you're kind of in the back of your mind thinking about, well, where are these ghosts and what are they going to do to you, And so I'm a little bit weary about going into this thing because I don't really know what's in there, and I haven't seen it in the daylight. I've never been here before, so I'm walking around in absolute darkness. The camera's open for a 30-second exposure, and I'm walking around again, painting with the light of my speed light, trying to make sure that I don't have the light come back to the camera. So I pop a couple flashes from the distance to light up the car, and then I lean into the window and I pop a couple flashes in each location to light up the inside a little bit, just to get a little bit of light inside. And then later, I'm looking at we're driving off in the car later. I'm looking at the photos in the back of the camera. And I zoom in, and I see the silhouette of a head inside against the wall. I'm thinking, why would somebody be in the middle of nowhere sitting in this train car, and what were they thinking about me sticking a flash in there right next to their face and popping it off, and a little freaked out by that. I'm looking through photos, and then I see in another shot, in two of the windows, in both of the windows, you see the same head in both of the windows. And I'm thinking, well, why would I see the same head in both windows? It doesn't make sense. And that's when I realized, in some of the shots, I leaned in from the side, and you can see this is my body where I'm blocking the light coming out. But in some, there's a silhouette of me. But because I lit it from here, and I lit it from here, and I lit it from the end, and I lit it from the door, all the other lights filled in and made my silhouette semi-transparent. So it looked kind of odd. It didn't really look like a straightforward shadow. So this is actually me holding the flash here also in that shot. So yeah. So I was a little freaked out for a little while there, thinking, there's somebody was just sitting in here in the middle of nowhere for no reason. So before we go have a little bit bite to eat and see if it's anything we can shoot outside, was there anything that we talked about or anything that you were hoping to see that wasn't covered in that maybe we can go over really quickly? And then I should also just mention really quickly, feel free to email me if you think of questions later. Again, this is going to be a video up online on photographyexposed.tv, so if you're interested in seeing that video or any of the other videos, please go check it out. You can use iTunes, Apple's iTunes software, which is free, to download all the videos for free. Some of them are up on YouTube, but some of them are longer. The longest one I think is about an hour and a half actually. So depending on the footage, some of them I couldn't put up on some place like YouTube. And the last thing is, if you're on Facebook, I have a page up there where there's forums and things like that where people do discuss a little bit about what's going on. That might be a place to share some of your photos and maybe get some feedback and things like that as well. But does anybody have any questions about anything they saw or anything they were hoping to learn about?
I'm not even going to ask you about auto mode.
Well, again, there's a time and a place for everything. Sometimes you just want to pick up the camera and not worry about it, and program mode or auto mode. I use it sometimes, but typically my auto mode is aperture priority. At least I know what aperture I want to shoot at, and it'll match everything else for me automatically.
You would advocate raw data.
Oh, I pretty much always shoot RAW. The only reason I wouldn't shoot RAW is if I know that I need to immediately have JPEGs to put up on the web, or if I'm running low on space. And like a 12 megapixel RAW file as a 14-bit image tends to be around 10 or 12 megabytes, whereas you might get away with like 3 or so megabytes for the equivalent JPEG file on the Canon camera.